Welcome everyone, welcome. I'm Vicki St. Clair and I'll be your moderator for the next 60 minutes. On behalf of Acorn Federal, I thank you for joining us today. Our presentation is called Visual Communication Design for Today's Digital Culture. And boy, do we have a great guest speaker for you. I'll introduce her in just a moment. First, for those who aren't familiar with Acorn Federal, I want to share a little about our webcast sponsor. Acorn is a marketing, communications, and design solutions company. They specialize in print, web, and digital design and communications, including video. And they've been providing innovative solutions for some of the world's biggest and best brands for more than 25 years. Acorn Federal does the same as Acorn, but they work directly with the federal government. And I'm going to pull a slide up here which shows just a few of the primary clients that Acorn Federal works with. Specifically, Acorn Federal partners with government leaders in communications, marketing, communications outreach, visual information, and creative design and services. And they produce across all platforms in all media, including print, online, digital, and video. So each of the webcasts sponsored by Acorn Federal is specifically produced for government employees and contractors. Just to give you an idea of some past speakers, we've talked with LA Metro's Creative Director, Michael Lejeune. We've heard from CDC Senior Communicator, Dr. Cynthia Bauer, as well as Managing Director Dave Pewitt and Art Director Trey Shriveley of Acorn Studios. And all of those past webcasts are available. If you're interested, you can contact me by clicking on the email invite and just requesting the link, and I'll be happy to send those to you. So let's get started. Following our guest speaker, we'll have about 15 minutes Q&A. So at any time during the presentation, feel free to type in your questions down in the chat box. I'll make sure they're collected, and we'll make sure we answer those before we wrap up today. If you'd like to share great quotes from our guests, I'm sure there'll be a few along the way, you can use the hashtag Acorn Federal on Twitter. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest because she's got a ton of great material to share with you, and I don't want to take up any more time here. So our guest is Dr. Kimberly Lyles-Falkman. She's traveled to more than 50 countries and 6 continents, which I think gives her a really unique global design perspective. Her business experience includes leadership roles as VP of Advertising and Marketing, Director of Arts and Culture, VP of Marketing, and Creative Director. And her clients have included Fortune 500 companies and celebrities. She holds a PhD in Educational Leadership and Learning Technologies, a Master's in Art Education, and a Bachelor's in Illustration and Design. And I'm just summarizing what's up here because she has a really impressive background, as you can see. She's also taught at numerous universities and colleges, graduate and undergraduate level, for more than 20 years, and she's led her students to win over 60 awards for integrated advertising and design campaigns. I know she's really passionate about this work, and so I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Kimberly Lyles-Falkman right now. Kimberly, welcome, and thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you, Vicki, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I am excited about talking about this particular subject. Just to give you a little background, I actually worked on my research when I was working on my PhD on visual thinking, and I was very, very interested in visual thinking, visual literacy, visual learning. And at the time when I started looking at it, it was kind of in the background, you know, in education and in business. I think that what was in the foreground was text. Everybody was using text to communicate, and that was really the primary focus. And as we all know, even in some schools, they kind of dismissed art and design courses and drawing courses and anything related to design because they did not feel it was very important. But what we've come to realize today is that it is very important, and it really is in the forefront of our thinking, particularly when we're trying to work with the new landscape today, being digital elements such as apps and working with our computers. We're always working with visuals. So visuals really do rule. So I'm just going to take you through a series of elements in that ways to kind of think about strategies to support your visual communication needs. I can tell you what works for me. I can share with you what works with groups that I've worked with and reviewed over a period of time, as well as what's worked with education. So I just want to kind of help everybody to support their process in terms of utilizing visuals. It really is the fast track. It's the fast track to the innovative future. And we can all probably attest to the fact that we are all using all kinds of forms of actual visuals to communicate. And we all are communicating in some aspect when we actually are writing emails and we are sending out, gosh, even when you're tweeting. You know, we've discovered that even with tweeting, it's very important that you support your text with a visual, because it's more than likely going to be seen opposed to not being seen if you just sent a text. So again, visual thinking and visual imagery rules. So when I talk about visual thinking and learning, I just want to kind of, share that it's under the umbrella of, for this presentation in particular, it is under the umbrella of utilizing all forms of visuals. And nowadays we're using things such as digital images. We're all using photographs, of course, and we know that through using Instagram. I mean, people are using, YouTube. They're using photos on their phones. So we're really, really capturing imagery daily. We're utilizing illustrations, renderings. Many businesses are using maps and diagrams daily. We're using all forms of graphics, and as we now know, infographics, because we now are looking at big data, and big data now has to be reduced to a format that everyone can digest, and so we're looking at infographics. We're also looking at animations. We're looking at sketch notes, graphic recordings, videos, and social media to communicate information. So once again, it really is here to stay, and that essentially is the umbrella of visual thinking. When I was working on my dissertation, there was a discussion actually in the 70s that talked about visual thinking and visual literacy and what does it take to be visually literate. And at the time, there was a person by the name of Debs who actually really kind of oversaw the process and did a lot of research to bring it to the forefront in the 70s, and then it kind of took a back seat again. But in my dissertation process, because we are looking at the new landscape, because now we have digital to think about, that we're not just looking at, in his particular case, he thought that it basically was 3 or 4 areas. In my area of study and research, I've discovered it really is 5 areas, because when we talk about what it takes to be visually literate, we're looking at visual communication, visual thinking, visual knowledge, visual learning, and visual imagery. So it's multiple components in terms of what it takes to be visually literate today. Now, in terms of visual literacy, a lot of people say, oh, is it really important? Well, yeah, and now we're discovering that it is as important as reading, writing, and arithmetic. So if you take a look at, if you have kids, or if you take a look at yourself even in your work environments, when you send over any data to communicate, oftentimes the request is to support it with a visual. And so, again, when we talk about literacy, does it make is a designer more literate than a person who is a non-designer? Can a non-designer become more literate as a result of utilizing imagery properly? And I believe yes, that there really is a science to how we utilize visuals to support our text. And I think that the better you are as far as knowing how to use it to communicate, the better your full communication will be. And what's interesting is also through my research, there are actually various countries that are already looking at visual literacy and what it takes to be visually literate. And there was actually a really great study that was in France, and they essentially felt that a global digital citizen today in the 21st century needs to be very fluent in utilizing visual literacy and visual thinking. And they even have gone as far to say that they expect in less than 10 years for the people of France to present portfolios, for example, that would be in the format of a resume, but it would be full of lots of visuals to support who they are and to support their story. And therefore, they believe that it's very important that people are digitally literate and visually literate. So it's quite interesting. I don't think this is, when we talk about and think about visual thinking and visual communications, I don't think this is the end of the road. I think we're just at the beginning. We haven't even hit the peak at this particular point. Quite exciting. So when we think about the area of visual content, one thing that we cannot overlook is the fact that people actually take in visual information 60,000 times faster than text. And that essentially meaning the brain. The brain is processing visual information 60,000 times faster than text. That's pretty powerful. And it's kind of interesting because I've kind of been aware of a lot of these, this data and some of the stats that are out there for many, many years. And it always baffles me when I hear, in the 80s and the 90s how many schools were getting rid of the arts and design and things of that sort, and really training even young kids to really just be tech-centric and not so much visually centric, so to speak. And it always saddened me because I was like, wow, don't they understand that the brain processes this information so much quicker? So it's quite interesting that now, today, because of the digital landscape, that's really changing. People are starting to realize that visuals are very important. When we talk about the content, visual content, why it's so important, again, let's just take Twitter for an example. There was a time when Twitter, being 142 characters, basically was only text. And then there was a time when they said, wow, we recognize that if we associate a photo or a video with our text, that people are reading it, so much quicker. And also it is being sent out. In other words, people are sharing that content quicker and longer, so it gives it more shelf life. So it's very, very important to utilize visuals. And so we already know that it's been favored by social networks. We know it's shared more. We understand that it can change our brand, the visuals. We understand that it really is different to written words, and that it also reaches new audiences. Really important to incorporate visuals, and I think people are now starting to realize why that is. I've been very fond of, what Dan Rome has been doing, and as you can see, he has written many books on, writing on the back of the napkin, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm excited by what he presented. Very early on, he was one of the few people that really understood that, we can solve problems with pictures. And if you get an opportunity, you may just want to check out some of his books. But there's a slew of people that we can talk about that actually understand that you can solve problems via pictures, and pictures in the form of photographs and diagrams and things of that sort. But I think the whole world, again, is starting to recognize this fact. When we think about visuals, it really is an agent of change and part of best practice. Particularly, we cannot ignore this fact when we understand that people remember 80% of what they see and do. People, 20% of what they read, they retain and remember, and 10% of what they hear. So again, we can really see the difference between, seeing the process opposed to just hearing the process. So here we are faced with this new paradigm, and this paradigm is, not just in education, it's not just in government, it's in business, it's across the board now. And I can remember, at one point where I said, wow, I'm starting to see this paradigm shift in education because, as I think Vicki pointed out, I've taught at many universities, and I started to see the shift there. And then I started to see a shift then connecting into the areas of business, and from there into now government. I think government is probably a little slower at receiving it only because there's a bigger processes in some cases that they have to follow. But again, visual thinking and learning is at the forefront, and I think that everyone is trying to figure out how do we incorporate visual thinking into our processes, and how do we use visual thinking to support our communication. Well, what we do know is that it has brand impact for your business, brand impact for yourself as far as individuals, as consumers. It has global impact, and it's very important as far as the social impact. So pretty much across the board, education, government, and in business, we are actually all dealing with how do we fuse imagery and text to communicate. This culture today is really a digital visual culture, and as we know, I mean, when you look around and you can look at young people, they are always on their mobiles, and they're sending pictures, and they're sending text, and they're doing Snapchat, and they're sending Instagram, and they're working with visuals via buying videos, and they're doing videos via YouTube. But it really is such a digital visual culture. It's astounding what's happening today. I'm so excited because I saw it coming, and I almost feel like I saw it coming when other people didn't see it. And I was like, it's coming, it's coming. But yeah, it really is a digital visual culture, and I think everybody is now trying to figure out how do I incorporate visuals and text. And so I want to kind of walk through some of that in terms of some ways that you can think about incorporating visuals, and how do you become inspired in using visuals, and where do these visuals come from? And some of these principles, honestly, are principles that I believe and know have been used in the design world for so long. It's almost part of our process. And I think now we're starting to see that the whole world needs to know, well, how do we do this? How do we fuse imagery with text? Well, one of the ways is it may be something that you can add on to your Pinterest page if you have one. And again, if you don't have a Pinterest page, you may want to create one. We all know that Pinterest is part of the rage. It's a growing way of actually sharing a digital visual library. It's essentially where you can download visuals and pop them into boards and name them, and then you can go back to those boards and hit a particular image, and that image will take you back to the source. But what's really awesome is that I use the boards in so many different ways. I use them as kind of spaces to collect information on different categories. So if I wanted to, one day go back to a board that really was going to share various color palettes, and I do, and I'll share that with you. I will set up a color board in my Pinterest page, or on my Pinterest page. And I can then go back and look through that very quickly to come up with a color palette, opposed to trying to do a whole lot of research, because my research will already be embedded within this space. So that's the great thing about Pinterest. So if you don't have a Pinterest page yet, I wish I could just off the top of my head cite some of the growing numbers, but the numbers are growing. It's astounding in terms of how many people are using Pinterest today. And speaking of Pinterest, I know that there was, once upon a time, a lot of people thought Pinterest was, oh, it's for women, or it's for, people who are sharing recipes. And essentially that was part of it in the beginning, until businesses and education, they started to recognize, wow, we could really use Pinterest as a tool, almost like a toolbox for storing, our visual library. And so now most businesses that are very, very forward-thinking are using Pinterest as a way to share content. And they're sharing their content as far as if it's a retail store, they're sharing their actual retail products. And you can literally go into the Pinterest board and click it and access those products. So it's kind of amazing how fast Pinterest has grown. So this particular board is one of my boards for visual thinking, visual learning, and visual literacy. And as I read things, I pop my visuals here. I pop books here. And it's really a wonderful collection of material. I'll share a couple more boards as we go along. But I also want to just reiterate that, the importance of sharing visuals. When we think about businesses today, a lot of businesses are literally dealing with a lot of big data, so much data that nobody wants to read it. We understand now that people want to read less. And MTV in many ways has kind of trained the young people to see things very quickly, and I just think it's part of our culture, that people want to just see things. Everybody's busy. Everybody has to go on to the next thing. There's a lot of information out there for us to absorb, almost too much information. It's information overload that people want to see it. They want to see it, digest it very quickly, and keep going. And so we're starting to see a lot of groups using infographics, and we've seen the infographics are these really wonderful, I think they're great, visuals that actually support data and tell a story. And so we're seeing a lot of that. But again, we always hear about the concept, don't tell if you can show, because nobody these days really has time to read it. So we are really in an age, an era where people really need to show. The other thing that you can do to support your process is to think about curation, again, in other formats. There's a lot of different outlets out there, lots and lots of apps, and I think everybody just kind of has to find the app that works for them. And this is one that works for me, and it's called Scoop It. And Scoop It actually is you're just scooping little tidbits of visual and verbal information out there, content, and you're popping it down, and it's almost like it becomes your own little personalized newspaper. And you can go back to it, you can print it out. I mean, I've used this in so many different ways where I've created literally content on a particular area, and I've actually then been able to share it with, let's say, a body of people or students, and it's literally my own personal little kind of book or newspaper. So that's another thing you can do to actually support your thinking in using visuals. In terms of visual thinking and design success, I think that a lot of the success that I've had with sharing visual thinking with groups would be that there really is a process. And I'm talking about some of those things along the way as we are spending time together today. But I just want to say that there's a process, and a lot of people believe, oh, there's no process, there's no science. Oh yes, there's a science to visual thinking. And one of the things that you're seeing here is essentially when I was teaching, I won a lot of awards, as Vicki did share. And ironically, I have a big event tonight, which is an Addy Award, whereby I've had 3 students actually win. We don't know if they won gold, silver, or bronze, but it doesn't matter. They're all winners. But they actually won, and we'll find out tonight at the Addies what they won in particular. But that is for campaigns. And so when I talk about the success of these awards, it really again leads back to the fact that there really is a science. There's a science to design. There's a science to visual communication. And I think that a lot of people for so long thought that visual thinking was really fluff. And it really is not fluff. There really is a science. And I think now, again, because of the digital age, people are now starting to realize that visual thinking is becoming, it's key, and that there is science. So for me, I think that it's at the center of the creative process. It's, this whole digital delivery, you really have to kind of think about how am I going to use my visual? Where's my visual going to go? Where am I getting my visual from, et cetera? And I think there was a time when people thought maybe it wasn't so important, but now we have to recognize that you have to do more to be efficient to move your business further, and you have to be competitive. And sometimes these visual tools and the social tools are really there for growth and change, and could be if you use them and use them properly. And understand that this insight really can promote revolutionary change within your business, within government, within education. So when we think about the idea of all this content, this visual thinking in general, it's really big. It's so big it's almost overwhelming. And a lot of people that I know, even designers who've been in the business for years, are saying they cannot gobble it up quick enough, that it's just way too much. And so what I've recognized is that, this is not anything new or revolutionary in terms of what I'm saying. I just feel that we all try to figure it out, and what I think I've figured out is that we keep hearing this word collaboration. The word collaboration is, for me, really important in this day and age because I think that it's critical that we actually collaborate. We have to collaborate with groups. We have to collaborate with people that know more than us. We have to collaborate with people that know things that are very similar to us. But the reality is, the way I look at it is, if I'm around 5 people, we have all read different things. We're all, we have very different worldviews. And the reality is, we have to share in those worldviews. And the more you share and the more you collaborate and the more you borrow, and I do say borrow, not steal, but the more you borrow information from other people, the better off you'll be. And so it's important that we really look. And when I say look, and I always tell my students, don't just, did you look? Or did you really see it? Or are you just, like passing the page, turning the page? Did you see it? And when I say that, I mean really you have to understand how to even be more visually literate, look at the content, the visual content. What's really there? How is it handled from text to layout to the structure to the color to the to the flow, to the grid. Really looking at content, visual content, can help us to be more visually literate. So touching things, and when I say touch, here's a very interesting thing. I can remember being in the classroom and, when all the apps started coming out, and people either feared them and would not ever, touch an app or download it. They were just kind of like, oh, that's what it does? And I noticed that even in my classroom, I had some students who were kind of fearful in the beginning, even though I was at one point. When I finally said, okay, in order for me to teach this, I have to do it. So if a new app came out that I thought was pertinent to, understanding visuals or understanding how to deliver and communicate a product better, I would instantly download it, try it out. If it was one of my faves, I would keep it. If it was not, I'd dump it. But I started getting the students to start open up your mobile phone, download the app, let's try it out, let's see what happens. So it's quite interesting just to see, what happens when you really go through the process of, opening up an app, opposed to just looking at it and saying, oh yeah, I see what that does. It just, the outcome's totally different. So try things, spark new ideas, share ideas, but the reality is you really have to touch it, try it, and it will help to spark new ideas. One of the things that I like to say is, just please, when you're going through this process, you have to remember that we are in information overload and that you have to engage. You really almost have to not be a snob. And what I mean by that is that, so many people know so many things, but there's some people that, particularly, let's just say, the millennials know a lot. And I know in some cases, for a person who may be teaching or a person who is a super designer, you may just think, well, they don't know as much as I know. But the reality is there's a lot of millennials that know a lot of stuff that, you may not know. And so I always just say, it's really important to engage and not be a snob, because that's the only way we're going to grow. And I'll tell you this quick little side note story. I was at a major design event one time, and there was a person sitting next to me who was renowned as far as the design world, sitting next to me. And this is kind of, at the beginning when iPads came out. And I had my iPad. As a matter of fact, it was a little one. The little one had just come out, and I had just gotten it. And he looked over at me, and he seemed really curious. And I thought, well, maybe he's just curious because I was kind of recording with a swipe the conversation of the event. And then I started to tweet it. And I thought maybe that's what he didn't know it was, I thought maybe he didn't know that process. But he really didn't know it was an iPad. And he said to me, what is that? And I said, oh. And I stopped for a minute and I said, wow, here it is, this major player in the design industry, and he didn't know what it was. And, and I could have been a snob, but I said, no, of course not. I should share this information with this particular person who is, again, renowned in the field. And he was ecstatic to know. I showed him this is how it works. Here's an app. Here's what I'm doing. I'm tweeting this information. And he was just, thrilled. And I was thrilled just to talk to him. So we talked a little bit more, but I walked away with something, he walked away with something. So again, I just want to say, share and don't be a snob. Critique work, be curious, be flexible. It's kind of like if you're going to go into a museum, instead of going through a museum and looking through, the galleries, just kind of looking, really analyze the work and assess the work and, look at what works, what doesn't work, what could have happened if you actually were behind the paintbrush. Just be curious, be flexible, and give feedback. And that's the way we're going to grow, I believe, in this fast track of visual communications. Rub brains. I actually want to say, and I just peeked over a little bit to the left, and I think that I saw a Professor Reisman pop up. I want to say, going way back to the program that I was in, I remember, if I am correct, she was the first person to say rub brains. And I've been saying rub brains ever since. So I really love this idea of rub brains because it's like you're sharing information. So have an opinion, ask questions, be curious, interface with others. As I said, the millennials have something to say, and the seasoned professionals have something to add. Observe and take notes, and walk away with the salient points. I try to go to as many design shows on visual thinking, visual literacy, visual learning as I can, and I always try to walk away with the most salient points because it's way too much to take away. So just try to walk away with what you can absorb. So we think about, ways of thinking. There's all kinds of ways to think, and some people have different approaches. Some work for some and some work for others, but you have to figure out what works for you. Mind mapping, whiteboards for ideation, writing it all down, I have found really works particularly in the classroom. If I actually fill a board, and these boards actually are boards I did very quickly in my classrooms, if I were to fill a board like so, opposed to just standing in front of the class, the students would jump up and they would take pictures, and they were walking away with, data in a visual format, and they were absorbing it, and they learned quicker, because a lot of my students have been visual thinkers, and they actually are visual learners. And so, again, mind mapping, I think it's an awesome way to go for many, many people. It's a good way to share information. So in terms of the visual experience, so we're telling our story. So you present your ideation. So when we think about design, the design world for so many years, when we actually are coming up with a concept, it's not just here's a concept. You really are presenting your ideation. You're actually going through a series of ways to come up with ideas and presenting multiple ideas to tell a story. That's typically what we do, and I think that's a really great visual experience, a really great way to present information. We understand that the 21st century thinking is a digital experience. So again, you could actually pull things off digitally to present an idea and actually present that to your client or present it to someone that you're actually trying to communicate with. Storyboards and mood boards, another way to actually promote visual thinking. And when we think about storyboards and mood boards, there was a time when mood boards were basically these big idea boards, and you just pretty much put lots of pictures on it and maybe some texture and some type and things of that sort to tell a story. Now there are amazing digital storyboards and mood boards out there. One in particular, I actually had a client at one point, and I had to, this is right when the whole digital thing was kicking in, and I had to try to show them, here's a video, here's a visual element, here's some text, and it was just kind of mind-boggling. I was like, how do I show all of this? Where do I go, and how do I show it all in one page? And I came across something called Muralink and something called ThingLink, and it was pretty awesome because, and if you get a chance, take a look at those particular sites later. They literally host, it's one page that hosts everything digital. So you literally can show a story, present anything, and click on one button and show your video and show your text and show your Pinterest page. It's just awesome. So that's another way to show and communicate visual stories, and that is Murally or ThingLink. As far as ideas, images, words, color, texture, videos, photos, you're going to have to find a way at some point. If it's not today, I think that's fast coming, that we're going to have to start telling these stories in a bigger format beyond Prezi and beyond PowerPoints. Even though they're trying to still adjust, I just think that Neuralink and ThingLink are really on the right track to supporting all of this digital information for visual communication. When we think about tools, there are a lot of tools out there, a lot of visual tools, and use them. And what's interesting, a lot of people have a lot of fear because they're like, wow, it's new, I've never used it, I haven't seen anyone use it. But it's good to just try it to see if it meets your needs. And there's great things out there. There's one, which records, visuals as far as note-taking. There's all kinds, from pens to, sketch notes and so on. So take a look at what visual notes exist out there. There's also some really great applications. And I've used all of these. I have particular ones that I love, and I'll tell you that. We have Adobe Ideas, Sketch Notes, Graphic Recorders, Sketch Roll, Bamboo Paper Jot, Penultimate, and Paper 53. I love Penultimate and Paper 53 to tell my visual story. Penultimate and Paper 53 are great from the standpoint that I can, with my iPad, I can actually access my photos, select a photo, pull that photo up into my iPad to tell my story to my client or other, and I can actually write, I can draw, I can point things out. I mean, it's just amazing. So it's a really great way to tell your story and pull it from the internet, or pull it from your notes, or pull it from your photo library. But we also have to start thinking about how we're going to tell our stories, in that we're often moving away from our desktops and we're going onto our iPad. So how do you tell your visual story on your iPad? And I think these are all really awesome applications. So we have other ways of sharing the written word and the visual. Sometimes when I'm actually working to tell a story, and let's say I want to put something in the format of categories, I can actually use Post-its to tell the story. I could give a group various colored Post-its, and they can put the Post-its up there based on the category that I'd like to share. It's a really great visual format. You can move things around to accommodate your needs. But again, it's a great way to diagram your writing. But once again, it's a wonderful way of fusing the visual with the written. We talked already about, getting visual and looking and reading and touching and drawing. When you're working on the board, draw something. You don't have to be an artist. You could just kind of doodle or sketch to get your point across. There's so many different ways to actually to share information. Staying ahead of emerging media and tools is really critical. One of the things that is happening is that, emerging tools and visuals are coming out probably quicker than we can actually use them. What I like doing is, if you look at some of the major digital magazines, let's say, or major visual communication magazines, they often will, at the end of the year, list the top 20 or the top 25 or the top 10 or the top 5 emerging media and apps, let's say. And I always like to look at those categories, because sometimes it means that a lot of visual communicators have already used some of these tools, and then I try them out to see if it works for me. So it's important that you get in there and just kind of start reading, start accessing the tools. But we have so many different things, and I'm just going to kind of just really quickly throw some thoughts out there for you in terms of what we're looking at today. You won't be able to read most of those. So just aside from print, we know that print exists, and we know that we can always use basic print. But we also know that because of this whole digital movement, that there's all kinds of things out there. So to tell a story, we actually now are using hashtags. We're using a hashtag today. For anybody who's interested, they could go to hashtag #AQuintFederal, and they can actually start a conversation. You can support that conversation with visuals. So again, we're seeing a lot of different uses of telling stories. We already know about the infographics. We talked about those. For any of us who've gone into Target, you've seen the actual little monitors that are up at the beginning of the aisle to tell you how to make something for the day or how to actually create something as far as a project. So we're seeing visuals, on a daily basis in apps and emerging media to tell stories. We are actually seeing tutorials pop up on our screens where they're telling you how to make pasta for the day, and so we're seeing, again, a surge of those items. We're seeing interactive kiosks. Anybody who's gone to Nike lately, we know that Nike is pretty amazing, and they're always fast-forward thinkers. And Nike actually is, you walk in there and you can actually visualize with the kiosk what you'd like your sneaker to look like. And you could actually put together your sneaker, and you actually can then have that actual physical sneaker that you actually created. So we're seeing a lot of personalization that's happening, and a lot of that personalization is connected to visuals. So that's quite amazing. We're seeing challenges and contests that are starting to emerge. One of the best examples that I can remember is that one of the toilet paper companies actually had a big campaign where they actually asked people a simple question of over or under, and meaning, do you put your toilet paper over or do you put your toilet paper under? And so they actually started a whole conversation about that. And I'm going to talk more about that later, but I do want to just kind of insert this now. It's really becoming, the visual discussion is really connecting to the consumer. And the consumer is now chiming in many ways, in text-based as well as through visuals. And they're sharing their stories and things of that sort. They're uploading pictures. This is how I do my toilet paper. How do you do your toilet paper? But more importantly, as a side note, because the conversation's getting so big, as far as, visual thinking and text and how we communicate, the businesses are capitalizing on this, and they're actually, able to access now your data. They access your data, and now you're in their database, and they can keep the conversation going. So what was really amazing about this particular toilet paper company is they ended up, because of that one question of over or under, they had so many people chime in that they ended up with so many hits that went viral, that they actually walked away with, a large sum of new followers on Facebook. So we're seeing all kinds of ways that people are actually getting involved in the conversation and using visual thinking and the merge with text to communicate. We're seeing things such as augmented reality, AR as they call it, and AR being augmented reality where things are coming to life. And if you get a chance after this particular segment, just kind of Google it and you'll see there's some really great examples. But that's coming, and that's where basically the best example would be if we were to look at a Hallmark card. Sometimes a Hallmark card would say, take your mobile, download this particular app, AR app, and take a picture, and you'll start to see whatever that flat image is start to move, and it tells a story. So that's augmented reality. So that's coming at us. We're seeing 3D projections. I mean, I went to an actual 3D projection where they took this big visual and put it on top of the Coca-Cola building down here in Atlanta, and it was pretty amazing because they're telling a story. You're seeing this big video oversized of ice chips going into a glass and then the soda poured into the glass, and you have like thousands and thousands of people watching this 3D projection. And again, it's about telling a story visually. Pretty amazing. And we have other things, obviously we have Snapchat, which we know is that, you take a picture and you send it to someone and in 6 seconds it disappears. So a lot of people are using it for naughty things, but it really is becoming one of those elements that people are using to tell a story very quickly. So that's Snapchat. And I can go on and on. I mean, we have so many amazing things out there that people are using to tell stories, and my list is, literally probably 4 pages long. We have near-field communication, and we have, obviously we have scavenger hunts that we're starting to see, you know, where you have to take a picture of something and then upload it, and there's a contest associated. There's so many amazing things happening. There's Flipagram, where you can actually tell a video story and upload that in minutes. You know, I love Flipagram. And I can go on and on and on. But again, it's coming at us quickly, and the story of, you know, telling your story and using visuals is just beginning. We have other items such as when we think about innovation. That's a big buzzword these days. So everybody's talking about innovation. You know, how can you be more innovative within your company or your government or education? And it really is key in this day and age. Everybody wants to innovate, but I think that when you think about innovation,
Kimberly?
Yeah.
This is Vicki. We're having a little interference on your phone here.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that sounds better. And just to give you a heads up, we are at 12:46, but I'll let you continue, and because you've got some great stuff here.
Okay, okay, gotcha. So we're looking at.
So we do have a couple of questions that we'd like to try and get answered before the end. We come off at 1, but we can, you know, run a little long if we need to.
Right. Okay. I'm going to just keep it moving and go very quickly. Okay, because I would love to answer some of the questions. Absolutely. Okay. All right. So again, just innovation. We're looking at innovation as being key. So as your company or business or your government decides to talk about innovation, just keep in mind that you want to figure out how can you use visuals. Other areas, as we talked about, when we look at Pinterest, this is one of the typography boards for inspiration that I actually started. It just gives me great ideas in terms of how to actually come up with concepts for typography. This is for, you know, just an ad campaign. Certain ad campaigns out there that inspired me. And so just pasting those down. Again, color and color inspiration. You can create your own boards. This would be essentially just, I'm trying to give an overview. This is my own particular framework for, you know, coming up with a campaign, because nowadays when we're looking at design, it has so many different channels that you have to figure out how do you connect all your channels, your digital channels. So, you know, this would be like an example of having a client and having to do a print ad or poster and then doing social media and then doing a mobile app and a buying contest, etc. So this is something that I've used within my own classrooms. There's been a big question as I've done a few presentations, and a lot of people are like, well, how do I actually, you know, do all this work as far as coming up with creative ideas, and I don't have the staff or I don't have the time? Well, I just want to say that, you know, creative teams really are all around you. Whether if you're, you know, in a classroom, your students are your creative team. I mean, they basically can come up with new ways of marketing. You have businesses. The people that are sitting at your front desk can actually help with your social media. You know, government, you know, you have lots of teams. So again, creative teams are all around you. And so it does not have to be an expensive process. So turn your people into marketeers. And social media really can help you. We talked about big data, but again, it's important that we understand that we have to take that big data and make it meaningful, and utilizing design can support that process. I'm going to kind of skip a few slides so we can kind of get to the big picture. And one of the things we talked about earlier was the idea of this conversation these days. When you're talking to the public, you're really talking to the consumers on the other end, and it's important that we talk to the consumers and understand that if we talk to them, they'll talk back to you, and then they'll talk to their friends. And that's really what it's all about, is starting a conversation. So maybe it's a visual conversation in some way. Businesses need to actually reach out to clients to say, you know, or kind of tease them with, you know, a contest or something to get them to talk, to get them to upload photos and things of that sort. But it's really important that we keep the conversation going. It's kind of like a circular process. And understand that there is a relationship between people and brands, and that it really is important in order for businesses in particular to survive that you keep those relationships together. At some point you can go online. I actually have an issue account which I actually upload some of the design work from past students who actually have award-winning work and have used a lot of these really great visual thinking processes. And if you don't have an issue account is awesome because it's kind of like a library where you could actually kind of save your magazines or save your images or save content. We've kind of talked about using templates, but understand that templates and apps are out there. If you don't know how to do something or set something up as far as a layout, all you have to do is kind of pop in that word in Google templates, and you can find a template for anything, PowerPoint templates or other, and that will actually help you to do it quicker and seamlessly in many cases. I'm not going to go into this in a big way, but you're probably starting to hear the word design thinking popping up, and it is different than visual thinking, but understand that design thinking really is kind of embedded in visual thinking. And when we think about design thinking, Harvard and the D School, Stanford, they're all using this process. It actually originated in the D School primarily, but it is about using creative techniques to problem solve. Businesses are using it to problem solve, and so it's buried in the use of humans. So it's human-centered, but it is really coming up with several iterations to come up with ideas. But design thinking is at the forefront of the thought of, again, innovation. Coming to a close, I do want to share that I believe that when we think about this whole visual communication and graphic design departments and things of that sort, we're really looking at now a whole new structure, and it's coming if it hasn't come already. But we're looking at a core of 4. We're looking at visual communications experts on board, a copywriter who writes content, and in some cases people are calling that person a CCO or content officer. A social engineer, and an analytics person. That really, to me, is a new creative team. It really is comprised of these particular unique individuals to come up with a campaign for corporations and others. So again, visual communication expert, that's the person that I believe was previously known as the creative director or the art director. When we think about visual communications in general, we talk about what is that person? Who is that person? What do they look like? The visual communication expert really is a hybrid person. They are kind of like a techie person with a media background. They're a thought leader. They're a graphic designer. They're an advertising brand ideator, and it's tossed in with a little marketing. And I find this to be true because when I have students going out into the world, they are now wearing multiple hats. They're not asking for one specific type of student anymore. They want the student to wear multiple hats, and that seems to be the categories. So when we think about Workforce 2020, I think the things that we just talked about, that's pretty much what we're looking at as a person who's wearing multiple hats as we look at the new workplace. And that pretty much sums it up there also. If you get an opportunity, you may want to take a look at this. I did a little YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, which is right there, and basically, I talk to the students who are out there in the industry already about the future of design and what do they see coming. So some of their remarks are here, and they talked about what they're seeing, and little snippets are part of that particular YouTube video. So essentially, I just want to say I hope you guys enjoyed this particular process with me. I do understand that I truly believe that visual content and visual thinking rules, and visual thinking, design thinking, it's really new thinking. And I do believe that it's at the forefront of not only education but in business, government, and for entrepreneurs. So communicate and immerse yourself. Thank you very much.
Kimberly, that was awesome, and gosh, we could have spent another hour going through this, I know. So I want to just let everyone know, if you do have to leave at 1 o'clock sharp, please feel free to do so, because the webcast will be available afterward, and we'll make sure you get the links to everything you need. So we have a few minutes here that we'll take for Q&A, and the first question I have for you, Kimberly, is how do you think this new emphasis on visual learning, thinking, and doing will affect young learners as far as basic skills such as reading, comprehension, vocabulary? How do we create balance in our communication to blend the traditional with the new?
Good question for young learners. I think that it's going to require a lot of just re-engineering as far as schools in general, because I think that the old way of thinking is that students were taught to, utilize text. They were taught to, dismiss visuals. And I think that the new thinking is someone in the classroom or above has to recognize that visuals are important and they cannot be dismissed. So I think that the new thinking would be just to absorb this new culture and utilize it as often as possible. Because if it doesn't happen, what we're going to start to see, I believe, is an influx of students, which is kind of happening in some cases. They're going to be ahead of their professors or their teachers. And they're using it. They know this stuff. They're working on it just every day with their mobiles. And so it would be sad to see a faculty member not know as much as the students know.
Right, right. How do you address the challenges of balancing the emphasis on visual content, fusing images and text with consumers with disabilities, for example, with visual and hearing impairments?
Ah, interesting. Well, there are actually in government in particular, they actually are utilizing a 508 process. And the 508 process for a person who's blind, let's say, would actually let them know that there's a visual, and here's what the visual is actually showing. And then they actually can read their text. So it's not just like, they're just reading text and there's no content dealing with visuals. So that's one way, is to incorporate 508 training within a company, and particularly in government. I know that's kind of here for government industries, but that would be one way to incorporate visuals for learning.
Okay. So you mentioned some great tools, and we're going to have access to those in the slide deck when the webcast goes up online. But is there one tool, if you had to pick one tool, visual content tool, that you could not live without, what would that be?
Oh, I cannot live without Pinterest.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
That's my library. That's my go-to library. If you said, Kim, I need you to design something in 15 minutes, and I needed to come up with, inspiration. That's my inspiration.
And do you have a section up there of books that you recommend for people who want to learn more about visual design and the science behind it?
If you go to my Pinterest page, and that's Kay Lyles Fulkman, if you go to the Pinterest page, I have a whole section on visual thinking and visual learning, and there are books and there's
Kim, you're breaking up there. I'm sorry. Could you say that again? You broke up a little there.
Okay. Yes. In my Pinterest, within my Pinterest page, there's a board specifically stating visual thinking, visual learning, and visual literacy. If you go to that board, that's where I dump all my books that are related to visual thinking, visual learning, and that will be a good starting point. And the other place is, if you go to my Scoop It page, there's a whole section on visual thinking, visual learning, and that will also have books and other resources.
Okay, so Pinterest and Scoop It. Another question for you. How would you define an information literate citizen or student?
Information literate? That's interesting, because that word is becoming clouded in some ways. Because when you think about information literacy, a lot of people associate it with libraries and reading and things of that sort. I think in terms of information literacy, it's dealing with, to me, there's going to be a crossover factor of dealing with big data. And big data to me also connects to analytics. And so I think that a person that's going to be more information literate is going to have to deal with those elements of where we were but where we're going. So analytics and big data is going to also be part of that component of being information literate.
Great. And then following on from that question, one of our participants says she sees the new basic skills for the 21st century as the ability to access, analyze, and communicate information. What's your reaction or reflection on her definition?
Access, analyze, and communicate? Let's see. I like those. I think those are three great components. And I guess when you think of access, analyze, and communicate, you are looking at access in terms of accessing the problem or the content, analyzing the content, and then communicating it. So yeah, sure, that could be a great framework. I'm sure there could be a lot of other words used to describe the same thing, but yeah, I like that.
Okay. And this is another question, and this goes back to Pinterest. As a writer and data researcher, my work is very text heavy. I'm stumped about how to make it interesting on somewhere like Pinterest. How do I make it visual? That's a good question, I think, because I think I've run into the same kind of situation.
Okay. Well, there's actually, if you look at Pinterest and just type in, I'm just going to use the word quotes just as an example, because let's just say you were to take particular quotes or particular verbiage that was important. Just take a look at that as a starting point. Just type in quotes. I even have a quote board myself, but it's personal quotes, I guess. But that is a really good format to see how people are utilizing words, but in a creative way by using interesting fonts and handling it with supportive elements such as photographs or other types of imagery. And I think that's one way to kind of engage people so that it's not just text.
Okay, great. And our final question, how do you define innovation?
Very good question. I think that innovation is really about new ideas. This is my own definition, but I think it's more about accessing new ideas, accessing new information. And innovative being, it's ahead of the curve. It's not at the top, it's not at the beginning, but it's ahead of the curve. It's dealing with things that are not quite tangible yet. So I think that's very innovative practice.
Okay. And then to follow on from that, we're going to take this one question here, or comment. I look at many TED Talks and notice often they use no visuals, just words, talking in conversation for 15 to 18 minutes, yet they're very effective without visuals.
And what was the first part? I'm sorry, Vicki?
She looks at many TED Talks and notices often they use no visuals, just words. It's a different kind of environment though, isn't it? I think people go to TED Talks expecting to listen.
Right. TED Talks, it seems like most of the TED Talks, there's a lot of talking. There's supportive information being the visuals, usually in the format of, obviously some type of PowerPoint or video format, keynote or something of that sort. But there's a lot of talk. I would say it's primarily talking. It's very text heavy.
Yeah. All right, so we have to call it an end to it there. Great questions. Thank you everybody who submitted questions. And I want to say a huge thank you to our guest speaker. You have no idea what she went through to make this happen for us. She's a very busy lady with a full-time job. She teaches students at a very high level. As you can see, the quality of her work is awesome. And she's provided some great information for us all today. So Dr. Kimberly Lyles-Falkman, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I know Acorn Federal does too.
Great, and thank you. I'm reading some of the attendees. Thank you, thank you. And I just want to, there's a person here, Dr. Joyce Pittman, who, by the way, was my chair. And so I want to extend a big thank you to her. I also see there's a few other people from Drexel University. Frederica Reisman also was one of my first, professors. So thank you. Thank you to everybody out there for joining us. I appreciate it.
And contact information here if you want to get hold of Kimberly. You can tell she's very approachable and she is so passionate about this work. I'm sure she wouldn't mind fielding a couple of questions. Is that right, Kimberly?
That's correct. Not a problem.
All right. And this webcast will be available online. It usually takes about 24 hours to go out there. I want to thank each of you for participating today. Obviously, we couldn't do this without you, and so that's very important to us that you could take the time to join us today. If you enjoyed the presentation, and I know many of you did, one person said she wants to have all of her students view this webcast. And please tell a friend or colleague where you can find it. We'll make sure you get the link to the playback, and if you would share that around, that would be awesome. And before we go, I just want to say, it's super easy to work with Acorn Federal. There are 3 ways listed here that you can connect with Acorn Federal. And I'm going to give you a phone number here of the Vice President of Acorn Federal. She too is a dynamic lady. She really knows her business. Her name is Lee Andrews. And you can reach her if you have any questions about this webcast or about Acorn Federal in general. You can reach her at 410-975-4649. 4183, or you can email landrese@aquint.com. And we certainly appreciate you being with us today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope you'll join us next time.